Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
Fill in the blank. Notre Dame scheduling a home and home with Texas in 2028 and 2029 is blank.
It's electric, y'all. I love when Notre Dame plays these home and home games against, these big time opponents. Like those are the games I remember the most growing up. Like the home and homes with Tennessee, the home and homes with UCLA. They've done Georgia in the past. They've obviously done Texas in the past. I know they have Alabama coming up in the near. Like I think those are great because one, you get to expose your fan base and another fan base to South Bend and potentially like when Notre Dame plays Alabama Tuscaloosa. Like when's the last time Notre Dame was in Tuscaloosa, right? So like that's a cool aspect of things of just teams that don't naturally play each other much, getting that exposure and these different kind of fan bases essentially, and then also what it does for your schedule. It's a great boost to see if you win. It's obviously going to be a great resume builder. And then if you lose, it's kind of like a midterm exam. You see where the state of your program is at. It maybe that season, maybe it's a 2-year window, 3-year window. You have a better understanding of how you stack up nationally outside of your bubble when you play more of these games. So I love these games. I know Notre Dame plays really well in these games too. I feel like they win a lot of close ones. They lose a couple of the close ones, but they're always really good games. So I look forward to them.
Yeah, the last time they played, it was the road team actually won both meetings, if you remember that, 2015 and 2016. Notre Dame won down there, and then Texas came up here the next year, early in that horrid 2016 season. TD4ND was asking when they'll be. Both games are slated for September, according to what I see on the future Notre Dame football schedules. But it's very interesting, like you talk about beefing up your schedule, because 2028, Texas and Arkansas are home games. They're also going to have Clemson and Miami that season. So this is 4 years down the road. What anyone's going to look like 4 years from now, it can change, obviously, quite a bit. I do like what Stymie is saying about, recruiting Texas to be able to make those trips. You went down to A&M this year. You're going to go to Texas. And at some point, Notre Dame will make a trip, down to Dallas to play SMU as well. But 2029, Notre Dame hosts Alabama and goes to Texas in the same season. They'll also have Florida State on the schedule, depending on what Florida State is. Yeah, and then you look at 2030. Vince and I were talking yesterday. I couldn't remember what years, but you remember a couple years back, they announced that Notre Dame and Indiana are going to play a home and home. And that's going to be in 2030 and 2031. Notre Dame will have Indiana at home in 2030 and go to Alabama that season. They'll also host Florida State that season. How about this for a 2031 schedule? Indiana, they're at Indiana. Clemson, they host Florida, and they also play Miami in 2031.
That's what I mean. Like as a fan, this is what you should want. These big market, big matchup games. I think that these are, as a fan and kind of where college football is progressing with kind of these mega conferences is you want these big kind of matchups, right? And I think Notre Dame is kind of following the trend of where these mega conferences are going and adding sort of more of those games onto their schedule. And, it's funny because it's like you think, 2028, 2029. It's like, well, dang, we're almost into 2025 already. Like that's right around the corner. You know what I mean? It's like when I hear those years, I'm like, what's it matter? Like that's 10 years from now. But like they're getting closer and closer. So I like this transition kind of to where the schedule is headed. And I think it does Notre Dame favors as well, too, as long as they, they win these games. I think it does well nationally of, okay, Notre Dame is playing SEC schools more consistently, or they're playing, some Big Ten schools more consistently. I think that does more for the crowd of, well, Notre Dame is independent. They don't play anyone, da-da-da-da-da. So I just think it's a kind of a win-win. Unless they just start losing all these games, then it's like, then that becomes an issue. But I don't forecast that happening.
No, I mean, that's, because again, like if anyone's complaining about this year's schedule, and I mean, obviously there's from a marquee standpoint, there's reason, and even strength of schedule and that whole thing. But, again, like 2028, Texas, Who knows what Arkansas is going to be, but Clemson and Miami. I mean, you've got three teams that have at least at some point, three opponents, and then Notre Dame being the fourth that are all college football playoff conversation teams, and then obviously Indiana, Alabama, Florida State, Florida, Miami on, Clemson again on down the line. So it's like these schedules are not going to be lacking over the next few years.
No,
that's for sure. Yep. And, we'll probably get outcry the other way. Why are they scheduling so tough? But hey, people want to play Notre Dame, like give it to Texas as well. They're in the SEC and
it's a big out of conference game. They don't have to play that game.
Absolutely.
Look at majority of those teams out of conference schedules. And you'll respect a team more like Texas for out of Notre Dame.
Yep. So Notre Dame travels to New York to play Army, of course, this week, and then they fly to the other side of the country to finish the season next week against Southern Cal. Marcus Freeman talked a little bit about mitigating that travel.
Yeah, we've known, this kind of timeline for quite a while. So you got to make certain accommodations when you get back at 3 or 4 in the morning. Made some changes in the schedule for Sunday. There's their day off, but Monday, what we're going to do on Monday, post Army. And then it's a unique week, USC week, because it's Thanksgiving break. And so Tuesday will be a Tuesday, but we kind of made some modifications in terms of sleep and things like that for Wednesday through Saturday. And so this has been in the plans for a while. We got a great sports performance team that we meet every week, but have really thought about this for quite a while.
Been thinking about it for quite a while. Scale of 1 to 10. What's your concern going from New York to California this week and then next week, factoring in what's on the line for the Irish?
I would say a 2 out of 10. And the only reason I'm giving it a 2 is because I think more or less people like broadcasters, commentators, podcasters, I think they'll try to maybe make this into a talking point, right? And then it's like that becomes a distraction potentially for their players because they're like, oh, like they start kind of thinking about it a little bit. But if that doesn't creep in, then it's really no big deal. And I think the big thing that Marcus Freeman talked about that helps them in this situation is the Thanksgiving break, because Notre Dame football doesn't have to worry about anything but football that week. They don't have to go to class.
Sleep. Yep.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about homework, all of that stuff. It's more or less it's football. And they're going to tell you when you're outside of football, probably what you should be doing. There'll be a lot of like team dinners, you know what I mean? Kind of like I'm assuming kind of like a holiday dinner too. So it's like, there's a lot of different things that go into it. And luckily for Marcus Freeman is like, he has a staff whose job is dedicated to probably thinking about this the entire season, right? Like someone's sole job was probably thinking about this 2-week window and what is the most efficient travel plan between, New York, LA, practice, and all those things. So I don't think it's a big deal. All these kids are young too, at the end of the day, right? Like some of these kids can go to bed at 4 a.m. and get up at 8 a.m. and, just go about their day. And I'm not saying that's what you want to do the night before a game, right? Because you still want to get your rest and stuff. But, this isn't quite, I think, as big of a deal as what people often think it is.
No, I mean, all of these things, whether it was last year going to and from Ireland or all the offseason talk about the heat in Texas. And it's like all us old people, who, just, want to find things to worry about.
Or things that would maybe affect y'all, right? Because and I'm not saying y'all as in like you're an old person, but like older people, it's like the travel and like that stuff, it affects them more because they're older.
Right. Look, like anytime that I think about this kind of, like the travel, and I remember bringing this up before the season as well, about that when we were talking about the Texas heat and like everyone was so focused on the Texas heat. The 2018 season, Notre Dame went to San Diego to play Navy. The next week, they played Northwestern in Chicago. Then the week after that, they hosted Florida State. Then they went to New York, out to Yankee Stadium to play that Syracuse game. And then they followed that the following week, same deal, out in Los Angeles against USC. That was a 5-week stretch, 2018. They ran the gamut and they played in the college football playoff. They won those games by an average of 20 points. And I do kind of find it fitting that at the end of that 5-week stretch, it's the exact same scenario. You're going to Yankee Stadium one week, you're going to LA the next. Now, that game at USC was a 1-touchdown game. That was the closest of any of those games, but that's been the case when Notre Dame has tried to finish off the season, whether it was in 2012, remember, to get to the BCS championship game, or that 2018 season going out there to get into the college football playoff. USC has put up a fight at the end of this season. So I expect them to do the same this year, but I don't expect, just because you're going from New York one week to LA the next week, that it's going to be an issue. I think they'll be just fine as far as that's concerned.
So you kind of teased and dabbled into that USC talk a little bit. I am more scared, and we'll save this for next week, but I am more scared about USC than I was a few weeks ago. They have a new quarterback. He adds a new threat.
Offense looked pretty good. Yeah.
Offense looked good. Their defense is much better than what it's been in the past. And quite honestly, it's a rivalry game. And USC has nothing to lose, and Notre Dame will have everything. Everything will be on the line for Notre Dame, right? And what better way for USC to end their season than to ruin their rivals' dreams potentially of making the playoffs? So that game, I'm already getting nervous thinking about it, to be honest with you. But luckily for us, we have to worry about Navy, and Navy first.
Actually, Army and Army first.
Army. Say I get my academies mixed. Good thing I'm not Marcus Freeman. He's not got them mixed up.
Stymie, they still have not announced the game time for USC. We should probably get that Sunday at some point, I would imagine, is when they'll announce it. Be curious. I mean, in all likelihood, it's probably going to be 7 or 7:30 Eastern time. That's usually the way it turns out for for when Notre Dame plays, because even last year when it was crappy Stanford, right? So thank you, TD4ND. I mean, it hasn't been that bad. It's just like get a little sinus drainage every now and then, and just kind of crud trying to talk. And it's like I go all day and don't do that much talking, and then I get on here and I try to talk, and obviously it kind of affects it a little bit more. And I guess it's good, just kind of keep me warmed up for this weekend when I go out to California to do the game. So Mitch Jeter kicked 4 extra points for the Irish against Virginia last weekend, but Marcello Diomede and Zach Yoakum each attempted and missed a field goal as Jeter continues to recover from his hip injury. Marcus Freeman kind of explains where they were with Jeter in that game.
After warm-ups, we thought his line was around the 42, meaning a 42-yarder was probably the line for this game. And we had him kick the extra points, and then, we didn't want to kick the 54-yarder with him because we thought that was a little bit out of his range right now. And so at halftime, we just made the decision up 28-0 to say, okay, let's rest him for the second half and get him ready, hopefully, for this week and extend that line a little bit longer to where he was early in the year. And so he's not full as he was to start the season, full go as he was to start the season, but he's going to be available to kick. We just got to continue to see where that line is for Mitch Jeter.
All right, got to figure out where the line is for Mitch Jeter. Scale of 1 to 10. What's your concern with this kicking situation right now?
Yeah, I would actually put this at kind of like a 6 or 7 out of 10, kind of get into that lukewarm area because, as Notre Dame gets into what we hope the playoffs and playoff type games, every point is going to matter. These games can be decided by a point. They can be decided by a field goal. They can be decided by 4 points. That's a field goal, an extra point. I guess what I'm saying is every point matters the more that these games are intensified. Just think about the Texas A&M game, right? At the beginning of the season, Notre Dame hit some big field goals early in that game that came back and helped them. So that's what I am concerned with now. I don't see it being a problem maybe against Army and potentially USC, but as the competition stiffens, I think Notre Dame needs to button up these kicking issues because the last thing you want to do is lose a game by 1 point or a field goal when you've missed a field goal or an extra point. And to be honest with you, I didn't know that was the kicking dynamic this past weekend. Maybe I was just completely oblivious, but I didn't realize they used him only for the extra points and then let 2 of the other guys go on these longer field goal attempts. So that
I wasn't
explains
as
some of the
aware
things.
when I was because I was watching on the computer, like part of it in a gym, part of it on a bus when I was out there at the basketball game, but then coming back, kind of finishing off. I was, like second half. It's like, why isn't Jeter in there? He kicked all the extra points in the first half. I mean, Diomede attempted. I mean, it was not a short field goal. It was a 54-yarder. So it's not like it was a chip shot. That's a long one. But the Yoakum kick, 36 yards. You got to make a 36-yarder.
You got to
if
make
you're
it
on scholarship on a Power 4 football team, you got to make a 36-yarder.
That's a perfect segue. Did you see the game day clip this past weekend with Pat McAfee and the whole kicking?
I did. I meant to
and
bring
how
that up.
How
Yes.
the girl won it, and then he was like, "I can make that kick for you." That kid drilled it flush from 33. If that guy can hit it in some tennis shoes,
they split it. McAfee kept upping it
because
because originally it was going to be $100,000 they were going to split, right?
No, actually it was going to be 75, and then he upped it to 100. And then right before the kick, I think he felt the confidence of this kid and was like, you know what?
400,000.
400,000. So he gave 400,000 to Hurricane Relief and gave 200,000 to the kid who made it, and then the girl that he split it with. So he gave away $800,000 total. And I was watching the bit from his show. That comes out of his pocket. It's not sponsored by anyone. That's why he's able to give, that amount of money away and kind of, it's his own segment essentially, right? Like that, he can do whatever he wants with it because he's the one giving the money away. So it was electric. But if that kid can drill that, he could have made that from 45 right down the middle, right? So if that kid can make it in some tennis shoes.
The kid was from Indiana too. He drove out there from Indiana.
Fishers, right? So
and then did you see the thing that he posted? Like he had gone to like a McAfee kicking camp or something when he was a kid, and the photo that he had on his social media was a picture of him when he was like 9 or 10 or something like that, and McAfee in the background. That was pretty cool. Fishers, Indiana.
I got goosebumps because I watched it. I always try to watch game day live as much as I can. I usually catch like the last few hours for sure, or the last couple hours, and man, I got goosebumps watching it. Like it was watching, and then just seeing how everyone reacted too. It was just like everyone just went nuts, and it was just like this perfect buildup. But at the end of the day, if we got kids on the street that can make a 33-yard field goal, you can't tell me that Yoakum should be missing as bad as he did. It's not like he missed just barely or anything. Like he missed bad.
I mean, look, everybody remember last year when Brandon Aubrey, jumped on the scene. Everyone was like, why weren't they over there scouting this guy when he was playing soccer at Notre Dame? And it's like, if that's my situation with the kickers right now, I'm over there talking, to some soccer players.
I know. Like at what point? Because these games are going to become very, very every point matters in with where these games are going to be going.
A 36-yard field goal, you're at the 29-yard line. You got to make that kick. I don't care who you are. You're at the 29-yard line. You got to make it. So it's a 7 for me. It's fairly concerning. You're 2 wins away from being in the college football playoff. Again, you can't take either of these teams for granted this week or, these next 2 weeks. But, so if the Army game should not come down to a field goal. There's always a chance that it could. There's a better chance that the USC game on the road is going to come down to a field goal. You got to get this figured out. It's pretty concerning. So I might even bump mine up to an 8. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame great. Golden Tate called himself the YAC King on Good Morning Football today for his time in Detroit with Matthew Stafford. When you think of Tate, you think of blank.
I think of the fade king or the fade guy, just a guy who consistently was running fades on defenses, taking the top off, and especially kind of, early on in his career when he wasn't kind of, the primary receiver. And then I know we've talked about this before. I just think about his ability to run after the catch. Obviously that's what, his basically his breakaway speed, right? Like not even necessarily yards after the catch because that naturally, but his ability to break away, guys weren't catching him. And then obviously the awesome celebration where he jumped into the Michigan State band. That always is at the top of my list.
That's literally the first thing I think, when you think of Golden Tate is, him flopping into the into the Michigan State ban, and ESPN did that great article commemorating that earlier this season. That's literally the first thing, like me personally, one of the first things that I think about is he used to sit behind me on the baseball bus when we'd be on road trips, and then like when we went to the BCS championship game, I actually saw him outside the stadium going in. It's like, oh, totally random. Here comes Golden Tate running around a corner. But like in terms of the NFL, I just, just like freaky fast. And I think of just like a lot more of the diving kind of stuff, like very springy diving into the end zone, just doing kind of crazy athletic type things. Like YAC was not the first thing that I would have thought of, but obviously, he liked the way Matt Stafford throwing the ball there in Detroit.
He had very, he was a shorter, more stout guy, right? Like he wasn't this tall. Like when you think of him, you think of like a slot wide receiver, kind of how he's built, right?
He was a slot receiver, yeah.
And so, but the thing that stuck out to me when he was playing baseball and when he was playing, like his legs were so disproportional, just how big they were. But that's where all of his speed and athleticism came from, was, strong hamstrings, strong, like he had massive legs, but that would allowed him to be so, quick twitchy, to be able to have that breakaway speed, to do the diving into the end zone and kind of the stuff that you were talking about. So, that's, I don't necessarily think of the YAC. I just think of more or less his ability, his natural athletic ability once the ball was in his hands to get the first down, to get the touchdown. Like he had so many different ways about going to getting it, but it was centered around just his overall speed and athleticism. And I was spoiled too because I got to hang around with him at Notre Dame baseball. So like that's
true.
Pretty cool as well. He's a super nice guy. Always was, I'm sure I asked him for at least 3 or 4 autographs during my time.
Probably so. I think he got some pictures stashed away someplace. One of the many athlete celebrities that Jesse has jumped in the photo with. Okay, I'm going to give you the 4 best opponents that 4 different Big Ten teams have either played or will play this season. 3 of these teams are college football playoff contenders, and the other is far from being a college football playoff contender. I want you to see if you can guess the one that is not in college football playoff contention. Okay. And I'm actually going to have to go back and grab my master here in a master sheet here in a second, because I've got Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D. I need to find the one that actually, says which team is which. So
you
Team
find
A,
the answer key.
Yes, there you go. Team A opponent. The top 4 opponents are Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, and Washington. Team B, Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, Indiana. Team C, Ohio State, Wisconsin, USC, Illinois. And Team D, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. So which of those is not a college football playoff contender?
It's definitely got to be Team D.
Do you have any idea who Team D is?
I believe, I want to say it's Michigan.
No.
Is it Illinois?
No.
Dang. Michigan didn't play Penn State. That's the only one that's got me crossed up. Who is Team D?
Team D, I found the answer key just in time. I knew who Team D was, because this was basically the genesis of, how I came up with this question when I saw their schedule and started comparing it to some of these other playoff contenders. Team D, again, plays Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. That team is Purdue. The team that had to play the toughest conference schedule, not to mention the fact that they played Notre Dame this season. Purdue got stuck with a tougher conference schedule than either Oregon, Ohio State, or Penn State, the other 3 teams.
Yeah, it's brutal because like you look
They
at
essentially got to be everybody's whipping boy, so that so that the competitive teams now in everybody's, in defense, obviously nobody expected Indiana to be, what they were this year, but
or
still,
Michigan being as bad as they were.
right. But still, Purdue had to play Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. Penn State, everybody's talked about Penn State's schedule, obviously. Ohio State, Wisconsin, USC, Illinois. Their 4 toughest games compared to Purdue playing Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana.
And
Come
Notre
on.
Dame.
And but that's out of conference. But,
Well, yeah.
Ohio State played Penn State, Oregon, Michigan, Indiana. Of course, Indiana coming up this week. And Oregon's toughest, their schedule has not been overly brutal either. Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois, Washington. Of course, they did play Boise State, out of conference. But Oregon's schedule, not exactly brutal either when you sit and look at it.
Agree. And that's kind of, to me, like everyone wants to now get into, this strength of schedule war with everyone. And it's like, well, everyone's got blemishes, right? And just because you play in this conference doesn't mean that conference one is particularly good. And now when you have 20 teams in a conference, you're not going to play. The chances of playing all the good teams and so like, if you're in the Big Ten, that's what sucks is it's just going to be a roll of the dice every year because you don't know what teams are going to be, maybe the surprise teams like Indiana or the surprise teams like Michigan who aren't nearly as good and supposed to be good. So it's like there's just so much more room for variety or deviation when you add so many teams to a conference and not every team can play each other, right? So it's like this is what I think is naturally going to happen is any given year, one year you could have the exact schedule and it could be, a top 20 schedule. And then the next year could be the same exact schedule and it's a bottom 20 schedule.
Right.
That's the part that's it's just going to be a year by year.
Florida State, as an example of, like if you were playing Florida State last year, it would have been a completely different story than playing Florida State this year. And, vice versa with a team like Indiana. Obviously, and part of this as well, I don't know if you remember us talking about this back when, the Big Ten, when these Pac-12 teams, Oregon and Washington, were added to the Big Ten, obviously, along with USC and UCLA, because of the fact that not everyone was going to play everyone every year. They asked each school in the Big Ten, what games would you like to protect? Like which games mean the most to you that you want to make sure that you're playing every year, so I think they got to turn in up to 3 that they wanted to protect. It was at least 2. I can't remember if it was 3 or not. Penn State chose nobody. Penn State was like, nah, we're good. We don't need any rivalries protected. And I think when you look at Penn State's schedule, it shows that, whereas like Ohio State, now again, Michigan was a national champion last year. They're a 500 team this year, but Michigan was obviously going to protect Ohio State and vice versa, and like Purdue, the 2 games that they wanted protected Illinois and Indiana. And I didn't even mention that, Purdue did have to play Illinois this year, along with those other teams that I mentioned. Well, Illinois and Indiana, Illinois was at least ranked for a while, and Indiana is a top 5 team right now. So, that kind of plays into it as well.
Did you and Vince ever talk about the Cignetti and IU extension? Because
we talked about it yesterday. Yeah.
Me personally, good for Cignetti, but I don't know how you can empty the bank on a guy with no top 25 wins and the 100th ranked schedule. I just felt a little premature. I know the guy's a winner and he has a great track record and he's doing well season 1, but I feel like if you're IU, and maybe that's good on IU football, they haven't been good. Maybe they feel like they've hit the jackpot and they want to keep this guy as long as possible and be as good at football for as long as possible. But if I'm Cignetti, I feel like I robbed the bank because, again, I don't have a top 25 win and I have the 100 strength of schedule. And again,
he hasn't even finished a full season.
Right.
He's playing Ohio State this week. Like What if that whole thing blows up? And then if you're Indiana, how you feeling?
49-7 or something this weekend.
It's Indiana
right?
probably wanted to get it done before they played Ohio State, so he didn't try to up the ante on them.
That's true.
But Vince and I were talking yesterday. Like, he doesn't get to bring a third of his team from James Madison with him next year, like he did this year, to bring his culture with him. Now, he can still go out in the transfer portal, and he'll be able to find some guys in the portal. It's still impressive that he did it, but he brought very specific guys with him from James Madison and essentially brought a culture with him, set his culture at Indiana. It's going to be different every year going forward now. And like you said, no top 25 wins, bottom feeder schedule. They haven't even finished a full season yet. Good for him. He got the money, but like I said yesterday, Mel Tucker, Charlie Weiss, 2 examples of why you don't do it.
Yeah. I was just curious. I was hoping maybe we're along the same thought process, but like, man, I'd love to be Signetti right now. He probably had he's on cloud 9. He's undefeated and just got paid the most money he's ever gotten in his whole career. So
absolutely. He was at James Madison a year ago. Like, think about that. Okay. So after that disgrace of a football game last night, do you buy or sell that it's time for the Cowboys to just play Trey Lance at quarterback?
I thought about this for a good amount today, and one of my friends asked me this, and I don't think they played too horribly last night, to be honest with you. I know the final score was 34-10, but that game could have easily been 20-16 going into the fourth quarter. It wasn't as bad. It wasn't as bad as I think what it was. And I don't
look, Cooper Rush is a career backup. They traded a 4th-round draft pick to get Trey Lance, and he's going to be a free agent after this season. Fisher cut bait. Like, you gave up big draft capital to get him. So that's my case. I don't think I have to say much more. Like, this season now, if you're tanking for draft picks, keep playing Cooper Rush. But if you want to actually see what you've got in Trey Lance after you gave up a 4th-round draft pick for him last year, he needs to play the rest of the season, because there's nothing to play for the rest of this season unless you're playing for the highest draft pick you can get next year.
So, I was getting into that a little bit.
I cut you off because I was tired of your BS. I don't want to hear your freaking rose-colored glasses about, all things considered, they actually played pretty well. No, they didn't.
They didn't play bad last night. They really didn't. They missed a field goal, had another field goal taken off the board. That game, again, Houston got 2 late touchdowns on some cheap stuff.
Great point, Rabid Chihuahua. Rabid now have the Cowboys have lost every home game this season, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, you can't expect them to win anything now. They're on their backup quarterback, but Cooper Rush didn't play bad, but you know what you're getting with Cooper Rush. It's time to play Trey Lance. Because of what you talked about. You gave up draft capital.
I love those ant killers, man.
You know Cooper Rush.
Like, those were awesome throws, man. I was just loving that.
You know what Cooper Rush can be. Just let Trey Lance go out there.
Look, the Giants are going to DeVito, right? The Giants are going to DeVito. If the Giants can go to DeVito, the Cowboys can go to Lance. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off.
It's okay.
I'm over this team, man. And I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this, Jesse. I tried, I went into the offseason. You know how pissed off I was about those idiots down there and Mike McCarthy specifically after that complete no-show in that playoff game last year. I didn't want to talk about him for a long time. And, of course, the season came back around and it's like, okay, I got built back up, even though they did nothing the whole off season, but I actually believe that they could be somewhat competitive. If Mike McCarthy, if somehow Jerry Jones decides to keep Mike McCarthy around for another year, I am done. I am done until Mike McCarthy.
There's a lot of people think that he should just fire him now, but he's all in this.
I don't know what that accomplishes because there's no one internally who's going to solve anything.
Yeah, but Jerry's all in this phase of, I fired coaches in the season before, and I'm just not going to do that anymore. It's just, but for why? Just show everyone where you stand. And Yeah, there's just got to be something where they're going to put their foot in the ground and say things are going to be different, because right now they're just doing the same old stuff over and over again. So just cut bait and let everyone know that the rebuild is going on now.
Traded a 4th round pick that they could have drafted a running back with this year, by the way. Traded a 4th round pick for a guy who's just standing over there on the sideline behind Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush doesn't have a future in the NFL. He's a career backup. All right, moving on.
But then what makes it more infuriating is they just signed Dak too. So why'd you give up a 4th round pick if you're going to give Dak all that money? It feels like, again, they're going to lose out on that pick for nothing. Trey Lance is going to be for nothing.
That's my point. So do you there's like Belichick, where there's smoke, there's fire, there's talk about that. Do you think, put aside whether or not Bill Belichick is probably, at the very least, he's going to interview with probably 3 different teams once the season is over.
He wants to coach.
Do you think Belichick would make a difference if Jerry Jones hired him?
Yes. I've said this before. Regardless of how much you think Jerry Jones is in control, on a day-to-day, it would still be Bill Belichick's team, and at least they would be disciplined. They would have some sense of toughness around them. In a reality check, guys wouldn't be showing up late to meetings. Guys wouldn't be showing up. Bill Belichick will send your ass home if you do that stuff, right? Like you can't practice, you can't play. Just the accountability, the discipline, a culture reset. Again, no matter who's in charge in the top, you could still have a tough coach down in the trenches with you. So I do think a lot of stuff, and I think that they would get some of that harsh reality. No more coddling, no more you're a Dallas Cowboy, you get all the perks and benefits. I think Bill Belichick would make things more earned at the end of the day. Things are going to be earned around here. You're not just going to be given things because you're a Dallas Cowboy. And I told you earlier today, I didn't even watch the main broadcast last night because I wanted to specifically – Bill Belichick does the first half with the Manning cast every week now. I wanted to hear what he would say about the Cowboys, if it felt like there was inflection in his voice when talking about the Cowboys, if it was something that he sounded, maybe an opportunity about. And the stuff that he talked about is, the lack of not using Turpin when they're most explosive players. He's like, that's the best returner in the game. Him talking about Aubrey being one of the best kickers in the game. Stuff that Bill Belichick would utilize, right? Because that's the type of coach that he is. And so, basically what he boiled it down to is they don't have a run game. And if you don't have a run game, how can you have a pass game, right? And just their overall horrible defense. And those are things that I feel like are the staple or the backbone of Bill Belichick. Stuff that even when things are at their worst, I don't think that they could be like it wouldn't be as bad as what we're seeing right now.
Excuse me. I agree with all that. DK says Belichick wouldn't go to Dallas. I disagree with that. Here's the reason he would go to Dallas. Don Shula has 328 career wins. Bill Belichick has 302. He wants to catch Don Shula. That's why he wants to coach again.
About 3 years, probably, if roughly.
Yeah. I mean, 2 years if you have a couple, really successful seasons. And look, I never would have thought that Bill Parcells would coach for Jerry Jones, and it lasted 3 years, something like that. Like, I think for all the longer Belichick is going to coach anyway, I think that he could make obviously there's going to have to be concessions that he would have to make, in terms of, input with personnel and those kind of things. Those things, but I think that those are concessions he's going to have to make anywhere that he goes. It's obviously going to be different in Dallas with all the things that you have to put up with the owner and all that stuff, but for the most part there's a roster that's in place. They just need to fill some key holes. So I think that he would be successful. Yes, Jesse.
My ding 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 bell would be that Belichick doesn't want a complete rebuild. He doesn't have time for a complete rebuild. Taking a team like a completely probably poverty kind of franchise or a team that he wants to win now, right? And Dallas still has a lot of meat on the bone in terms of franchise quarterback, franchise wide receiver, franchise defensive end, 2 high-end corners, right? Like some good quality young talent on the offense. Like there's a lot of meat on that bone. Good kicker, good kick returner. They just need to, like you were saying, fill some of those voids and just overall better coaching. And so I do think that if you're Bill Belichick and you actually want a legitimate shot at having another chance at a Super Bowl, being in a big market, like the Cowboys, and having, a lot of roster talent, Dallas makes a lot of sense, in my opinion. And, the best part of it is if they stink really bad this year, Buddy gets a top 10 pick at the worst, maybe even a top 5 pick with already what's all the meat that's on the bone.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with that. We went a little bit longer than I even thought. I've got something else I've got to do here in a little bit. In the meantime, I got Vince texting me, so I got to talk to you before you get out of here when you wrap up as well. Yeah, Sly Fox said, "Tell Vince to leave you alone." That's exactly what it was. That's exactly
I could see it in your face. You were already getting stressed about whatever you're going to talk to me about.
All right. Hit the like button before you leave. Appreciate you as always. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.